baste again. But now you can see this is loose. This is before I've sewn that zipper. And I'm just checking that that this is going to look good here, that these are going to line up, because it looks really bad if those don't line up. Now there's another thing you really have to be careful of, and that is that these two bottom parts line up. You don't want this to be, you know, one to be lower and higher than the other. That's going to be a problem when you go to connect the bottom front, center front panel. So pin that. You might even baste that too. I usually just pin it. And then on the top as well, you want to make sure that you've got that. I would, you know, zip this up, and so this, see how I've got this zipped. I've zipped it up at least somewhere. It doesn't have to go way up, but far enough that I can tell this part, it has to be zipped, so that you know you've got that pinned, glued, whatever, in place. And then again, the same thing on the top. I'm going to go back to those pattern instructions. There must be a better way to do this. Okay, so I've got that zipper positioned in there, and I've checked that these teeth are going to be the same, these are going to be the same, and this is pinned or connected somehow so that I zip that zipper up and see that this top edges are going to line up. That's really important. Then I can go ahead and sew that zipper in. Resist the urge to flip those teeth out and top stitch. Don't do that. We're not going to do that yet. First, we have to put the facing on. And all you do is, this picture makes it pretty clear, you just lay that facing piece right on top of the collar that's already on there. And this is where you're going to sew those edges that have this on them here. Okay, there's a little notch in the center of the collar that those two both have that'll line up, and you just sew straight across with your 3/8 inch seam allowance. If you got a zipper stop there, you know, accuracy, don't hit the metal, but be right on that edge. Now in this next illustration here, you can see it shows trimming off the seam allowance of the facing piece of the zipper, because as you can see here, when you flip it back over to the wrong side, it'll hang over too much because you lost, you know, the 3/8 inch seam allowance when you seam the first zipper in this step to the yoke. So they show trimming this off. What I prefer to do is to just serge that edge of the facing off right here before I even attach that facing. So here's my facing, and I'm going to serge 3/8 inch off the side without this mark. See, this is going to be seamed to the top of the collar. That's the top. That's the part that's not the top. So that's just how I like to do it. I think it's clean and tidy, and then I'll just slip stitch that nice finished edge to the seam where the yoke is connected to the collar. So that's just an alternative. This step here shows, in figure 6, step 6 shows understitching. What they're doing here is making a row of stitching that's connecting the facing to both seam allowances. Well, one seam allowance, but both layers of fabric. And what understitching is a super handy technique that prevents your seam from rolling out when you've got a facing. I use it a lot. I don't really think it's necessary for this fabric, for this stretchy fleece knits. I found I'm better off skipping this step because you get some bulk. See where they show here now, after you understitch that, your next step is to stitch these sides here, and you're going to have like this little bulk in here, and where it was top stitched down right here and here. So I actually skipped that. I've been happier with that. I found I can get these corner tips a little nicer. So what I do next is I just, after I've sewn across here, right across here, all across here, then I go and I sew right down here and right down here. But I do that, as the instructions say, with the line of stitches visible where I attach the zipper to this center front. So this whole piece here is going to be turned upside down when I stitch this so that I can see those stitches and stitch right on top of them. Then I just cut off any little extra here. I'd probably turn it right side out to check it first to make sure the corners look good. Then I would trim off any extra zipper tape. I usually use that kind of zipper tape that's just on the roll, so I got a little extra there I cut off. And then I can flip the collar right side out, and as they show here in this step, and check everything's good, and then top stitch. Now when you top stitch here in this step, and they show you going up and around and back down, there's really a tendency for this seam that you so carefully lined up with your pins in that method in the earlier steps, to this to pull up this way and for this to pull down that way. So, you know, sometimes I'll use one of these little, I like these little biology probes, and I'll just kind of hold that in place as I top stitch and not let this layer slide out from underneath there, or maybe even zip it up or do some kind of basting or something to keep those lined up. After all that work, you want that to be nice as you top stitch that. From here on out, you know, you sew the edge, that end piece onto the sleeve, and I mean, really from here you've done the difficult part. You got just a lot of seams to do next. All you're gonna do is attach all these parts, just seam and top stitch, seam and top stitch, repeat. Then all you've got to do is finish your sleeves and your bottom edge. I addressed this in part one, that there's several different methods you can use. If you are going to use a method that involves stitching in the round, like hemming or attaching elastic, then you can go ahead and do these seams. And these don't need to be top stitched, and then just, you know, hammer add elastic to these parts after you stitch that. However, if you're going to do binding with a binding attachment, and that's not going to be done in the round, in that case you'll just go ahead and, before you do the seam, apply the binding straight across each edge of each sleeve. Then after that binding is on, then you would do one of these seams, and then you would add the binding in one long piece to the bottom. So that sequence will vary depending on how you decided to finish off that bottom edge. I hope you have fun making these quarter zips and wearing it. It's a really wonderful garment. I think one of my favorite garments in my wardrobe. Hopefully that helps. Good luck with your 2212. Bye.